Hello and welcome again. How are you all? Welcome in the series of how organs interact with each other. This is the part 2 of how organs interact with each other. In part 1, we discussed about the lungs relationship with liver, heart, spleen, kidney and large intestine. Now these are the organs which are primarily connected to lungs. However, lungs have indirect but important interactions with gallbladder, stomach, urinary bladder, small intestine, triple wormer, and pericardium. In this video, we will understand them one by one. So let us begin with the lungs and the gallbladder relationship. The lungs belong to metal element and the gallbladder belongs to wood element. So this is a metal and wood relationship. Now how do they interact? Let us understand that. The lungs control chi and govern respiration. The gallbladder governs decision making and courage. So, if the lungs become weak, what will happen? If the lung becomes weak, the flow of chi will become sluggish. Then this will affect the gallbladder's ability to make decisions, which will lead to hesitation, anxiety, and timidity. The next function of lungs is that it regulates body fluids and the gallbladder controls bile secretion and it supports digestion. Now, what will happen if any one of them is weak? If any one of them is weak, there will be formation of phlegm and dampness which will accumulate. Another connection is that when the chi of the gallbladder is stagnant, it can create internal heat. And whenever there is heat, it rises up. So when it rises up, it goes to the lungs. This will lead to dry cough, irritability, and chest tightness. So now let us understand the imbalanced symptoms of the interaction between lungs and gallbladder. So the first pattern which will arise is when the gallbladder chi stagnates, it affects the flow of lung chi, which will lead to chest tightness and anxiety. Why? Because if the gallbladder chi stagnates, it prevents the lungs from smoothly descending chi. And when the lung chi will not descend, it will lead to chest tightness and breathlessness. There may be more symptoms in this pattern. The person will have difficulty in taking deep breaths. The person will sigh frequently. The person will be irritable and will also be indecisive in nature. Due to bile flow stagnation, the person will also feel dizzy and nauseous. The next pattern of this combination is when the gallbladder heat rises up, it dries out the lungs. And when the lungs will dry out, the person will have irritating dry cough and throat discomfort. Other symptoms like hacking cough, sore throat, hoarseness in voice, bitter taste in the mouth, insomnia will be noticed. The next pattern would be if the lung chi is weak, the gallbladder function will also become weak. Now, this will give rise to timidity and hesitation. Why? Because the lungs provide chi to support the gallbladder's decisiveness. So, when the lung chi is weak, a person may experience indecision and fearfulness. There can be other symptoms like weak voice, shortness of breath, and fatigue. The person may also get easily startled. The next pattern is this one was the third one. The next pattern is phlegm or damp accumulation from weak lungs will affect the gallbladder digestion, which will give rise to nausea, bloating, or gallstones. Why? Because weak lungs fail to regulate body fluids, which will lead to phlegm accumulation, which will affect the gallbladder and the bile secretion, which is used for digestion. Other symptoms like thick mucus in the throat, difficulty in swallowing can occur. There can be a tendency of gallbladder stones due to poor bile flow. The treatment focus should be to smooth the flow of chi in gallbladder to prevent chest tightness and oppression. Next, we should focus on clearing the gallbladder heat to prevent the dryness in the lungs. We should strengthen the lung chi to support the decision making and courage. We should regulate the fluids to prevent phlegm accumulation. These are some acupuncture points that which we can use according to the patterns. We can use lung 7 which will move the lung chi. It will also prevent chi stagnation in the chest and it opens the breathing. We can use gallbladder 34 which smooths the gallbladder chi which will prevent Qi stagnation, which affects the lungs. We can use gallbladder 40, which will strengthen the decision making power, and it will support the gallbladder function, and it will also boost courage. We can use pericardium 6, which will calm down the stress and which will regulate the chi. It will also help with emotional stress induced breathing issues. We can use urinary bladder 13, which is the back shoe point of lungs. It will regulate the function of lungs and it will clear the chest congestion. We can use UB19, which is the back shoe point of gallbladder. This point will support the gallbladder function and it will relieve the discomfort. We can use stomach 40, which will clear the phlegm. It will also help to remove mucus and accumulation of dampness. We can use gallbladder 21, which will relieve stress, which will relieve chest tightness and neck tension. Now we will see the relationship of lungs and stomach. Lungs belong to metal element and stomach belongs to earth element. So this is a metal and earth relationship. Now how do they interact? The stomach is responsible for receiving and digesting food, and the lungs distribute the refined essence which is extracted from the food to nourish the body. So, if the stomach chi is weak, then what will happen? There will be insufficient fluid for the lungs. And if there is less fluid, insufficient fluid, then the lungs will not be able to distribute it, which will lead to dry cough and dry mouth. The next connection is the lungs control the descending chi. Now, this descending chi helps push food down through the digestive system, and the stomach controls the ascending chi, which helps in digestion. Now, what will happen if both are weak? It will lead to poor digestion. The next connection is the lungs regulate fluids by dispersing the moisture, while the stomach helps generate fluids for digestion. So, if there is disharmony, what will happen? It can lead to excessive dryness or dampness in both the organs. The next connection is the stomach generates fluids and the lungs distribute them. So, if the stomach is too hot, if there is heat in the stomach, what will happen? It will burn the fluids, which will cause dry mouth, thirst, and dry cough because the heat will dry up everything. Now, what will happen if the lung chi is weak? It will disrupt the digestion. And what will happen if the stomach is weak? It will result in insufficient chi and moisture for the lungs. Now, if the digestion is disrupted, it will lead to bloating, nausea, or poor appetite. And if the stomach chi is weak, it will lead to dry cough and thirst. Now, let us understand the imbalance symptoms. The first pattern is if the lung chi is weak, the digestion will also become weak. Why? Because the lung chi helps push digestive energy downward. So, if the lung chi is weak, the digestion becomes slow, which will lead to poor appetite and bloating and also overall fatigue. The next pattern is if the stomach chi is weak, the function of the lungs will also become weak. Why? Because it will get insufficient chi and fluid. Why? Because the stomach generates chi and fluids. If it becomes weak, if the stomach becomes weak, the lungs will not get the nourishment, which will lead to dryness and weak respiratory system. Even symptoms like dry cough, dry mouth, and poor digestion can be seen. The next pattern is the heat rising in stomach will dry out the lungs. What happens is when there is excess heat build up in the stomach, it can rise and dry out the lungs, which will lead to respiratory dryness, throat irritation, and chronic cough. There will also be burning sensation in the chest. And when there is heat in the stomach, there will also be bad breath, acid reflux, and nauseous feeling. And the tongue will have yellow coating. The next category is this was the third one, this is the fourth one. So, the next category is damp and phlegm accumulation. Now, this will happen because of weak stomach and spleen, which will affect the lungs. Why? Because the stomach and spleen fails to transform the food properly, which is their job. Now, then what will happen? This will lead to accumulation of dampness. Now, if the dampness is accumulated, it will affect the lungs. And if the lungs are affected, the mucus will build up and there will be congestion in the chest. There will be even chronic cough and thick phlegm. Other symptoms like heaviness in the body and nausea will be observed. And when there is damp and phlegm accumulation, the tongue will have white or greasy coating. So, the focus should be to strengthen the lung chi, which will help in digestion, boost stomach chi so that it generates sufficient energy and fluids, clear the stomach heat to prevent dryness in the lungs, resolve the damp phlegm to support lung and the digestive function. Now, these are some common acupuncture points that which we can use. We can apply lung 9, which will strengthen the lung chi. It will also help to boost the energy circulation, which will support digestion. We can use stomach 36, which will strengthen the digestion and chi production. It will also improve digestion and it will prevent bloating and weakness. We can use spleen 6, which will regulate the fluid and digestion. It will also help balance the moisture to prevent dryness or dampness. We can also use conception vessel 12, which will harmonize the stomach. It will also help reduce bloating, nausea, and reflux. We can also use LU1, which will open the chest and which will help digestion related breathing issues. We can use stomach 40, which will clear the phlegm accumulation from improper digestion. We can also use Li4, which will move the chi and relieve stagnation. It will clear the heat and it will help to regulate the flow of chi between the stomach and lungs. Now we will understand the relationship of lungs and urinary bladder. The lungs belong to metal element and the urinary bladder belongs to water element. So this is metal and water relationship. Now how do they interact? So the lungs play a crucial role in regulating water metabolism by distributing fluids throughout the body, while the urinary bladder is responsible for excreting the excess fluids. And if either of them is weak, it will lead to accumulation of fluid, which will lead to edema. The next connection is the lung chi descends fluids to the kidneys, which then sends them to the bladder for elimination. So, if the lung chi is weak, what will happen? The fluids will accumulate. And if the fluid will accumulate, there will be problems like edema, scanty urination, or difficulty in passing urine. The next connection is the urinary bladder is a part of Taiyang channel, which plays a key role in Wei Qi, which is a defensive energy. And if the Wei Qi is weakened, one is prone to catch colds or other infections. Other infections like UTI. The other connection is when there is accumulation of cold or dampness in the bladder, it can obstruct the descent of lung chi. It will obstruct the lung chi to descend down, which will lead to coughing or maybe difficulty in breathing. Why? Because lung chi helps to regulate the water metabolism by sending the fluids downward. So if it is weak, the fluids fail to move properly, which will cause urinary retention or swelling. Specifically, swelling in the legs will be seen. Why? Because excess dampness in the bladder obstructs the fluid metabolism process. So instead of the fluids being properly excreted, they accumulate and affect the lungs, which leads to congestion in lungs. Other symptoms like frequent urination, cloudy urine, burning sensation, cough with mucus, chest congestion, feeling of heaviness and sluggishness can be observed. Now, these are the imbalanced symptoms. The first one is if the lung chi is weak, the function of the bladder will also be weak. Why? Because the lung chi helps regulate water metabolism by sending the fluids downwards. So, if the lungs are weak, the fluids fail to move properly, which will cause urinary retention or swelling. It will also cause incontinence, shortness of breath, weak voice, edema, specifically in the leg area. The complexion of the person would be pale and the person can sweat spontaneously. The next pattern is excess dampness in the bladder affects the lung chi. Why? Because excess dampness in the bladder obstructs the fluid metabolism process. The next pattern is external cold affects the lungs and the bladder. Now, the cold can invade the bladder, weakening its function and creating an internal cold condition. When there is internal cold condition, it will impair the lungs' ability to disperse Wei Qi, making the body more susceptible to colds or respiratory infections. Symptoms like chills, fever, runny nose, body aches, common cold symptoms, frequent urination, sneezing, stiffness in the lower back, and aversion to cold can be seen. Here, the treatment focus should be to strengthen the lung chi so that it supports the fluid metabolism and urination. We should also focus on eliminating the dampness so that it can prevent the accumulation in the bladder and lungs. We should also focus to warm the bladder so that it protects against the cold invasion. We should also focus on supporting the Wei Qi so that it enhances the immune function. Now, here are some acupuncture points that which we can use. The first one is lung 7. It will regulate the lung chi and water metabolism. It will also strengthen the lungs function to support urination. We can use urinary bladder 12, which will tonify the lungs. It will also boost chi circulation and immune function. We can use UB23, which will strengthen the water metabolism. It will also support the kidney bladder system to eliminate excess fluids. We can use urinary bladder 28, which will strengthen the urinary system and which will clear the dampness and support the urination. We can use conception vessel 3, it will strengthen the bladder and it will help with frequent urination and damp accumulation. We can also use lung 9, which will strengthen the lung chi and regulate the fluid. Now we will see the relationship of lungs and small intestine. The lung belongs to metal element and the small intestine belongs to fire element. So this is a metal and fire relationship. Now how do they interact? The lungs control the skin and the pores, regulating the sweating, while the small intestine separates pure from impure fluids, which regulates the urination. So, if either of them fails, it can cause fluid imbalance. For example, the person may suffer from dry skin, excessive sweating, or urinary issues. The next connection is the lungs govern chi, which boosts the small intestine's peristalsis movement for proper digestion and absorption. So, if the lung chi is weak, it can lead to weak digestion, bloating, and poor nutrient absorption. The next connection is the small intestine is linked to clarity of thought, while the lungs are affected by sadness and grief. Emotional distress, any kind of emotional distress can disrupt both, can affect both, which will lead to brain fog, indecisiveness, and depression. The next connection is the lungs and small intestine, they both eliminate waste. Now, the lungs eliminate waste via exhalation, and the small intestine eliminates waste via stool and urine. So, if either of them is weak, the elimination process will be affected. Now, let us look at some imbalanced symptoms. The first one is if the lung chi is weak, it will lead to poor fluid separation in small intestine. And if there is poor separation of fluid, then that will cause edema or loose stools. Why? Because weak lung chi fails to send energy downwards, leading to poor fluid processing in the small intestine. Now, this causes watery stools, fluid retention, and low energy. The next pattern is heat in small intestine will lead to heat and dryness in lungs. Why? Because excess heat in the small intestine will rise up. Because whenever there is heat, it rises up. So when it rises up, it scorches the lungian. It dries up the lungian, which causes dry cough, sore throat, restlessness, irritability, dark urine, and also burning in the urination, insomnia, anxiety, and facial acne, especially on the forehead and cheeks. Here, the color of the tongue would appear red. The next pattern is if there is blockage in small intestine, there will be stagnation in lung chi. When there is stagnation in lung chi, there will be chest tightness, chest oppression, or constipation. Why? Because if the small intestine is blocked with heat or stagnation, it disrupts the downward movement of lung qi, which leads to chest tightness and difficulty in breathing. Other symptoms can also be observed, like the person may feel hot and agitated and also will find difficulty in focusing. The next pattern is if there are toxins in small intestine, it will affect the lungs. There will be skin issues, cough, and mucus. Why? Because if the small intestine is unable to properly separate pure from the impure, toxins accumulate and these toxins are pushed out through the skin or lungs, which leads to skin eruptions and phlegm buildup. So, symptoms like acne, eczema, rashes, skin irritation, sinus congestion, gas, bloating, smelly stools might be observed. So, the focus should be to strengthen the lung chi to support digestion and proper fluid separation. The focus should be to clear the small intestine heat to prevent it from drying out the lung yin. The focus should be to improve waste elimination to prevent toxins from affecting the lungs and the skin. The focus should be to promote proper chi movement between the chest and the lower abdomen. Now, these are some acupuncture points that which we can use. We can use lung 7, which will regulate the lung chi. It will clear the chest congestion and also help in improving the breathing. We can use stomach 25, which will regulate the intestinal function. It will help to treat constipation, bloating, and abdominal pain. We can use small intestine 2, which will clear the heat in the stomach and it will reduce the burning urination and irritability. We can use Li11, which will clear the heat and which will detoxify. It can also help with acne, eczema, and inflammation. We can use urinary bladder 13, which is the back shoe point of lungs. We can use urinary bladder 27, which is the back shoe point of small intestine. Now, this point will improve the digestion and clear heat from the small intestine. We can use SI3, which will clear heat and improve the digestion. Next, we will discuss about the relationship of lungs and triple warmer. Lungs belong to metal element and triple warmer belongs to fire element. So this is a metal and fire relationship. Now how do they interact? The lungs govern chi, which makes sure that the circulation is smooth, while the triple warmer, which is also called as sanjiao, is responsible for chi and fluid distribution throughout the body. So, if the lung chi is weak, the circulation will be poor and there will be stagnation of fluid and the immunity will be low. The next connection is the triple warmer regulates water metabolism with the help of lungs to control sweating, urination, and moisture balance. If disrupted, it can cause edema, excessive sweating, or dryness. The next connection is the lungs protect the body from external pathogens, while the triple warmer controls the Wei Qi, which is the defensive energy. So, if there is dysfunction in either of them, it can lead to weak immunity and frequent colds or allergies can occur. The next connection is the triple warmer connects the burners of the body. The burners are upper burner, which is connected to lungs and heart, the middle burner, which is connected to spleen and stomach, the lower burner, which is connected to kidneys and bladder. So, the triple warmer connects the burners, helping maintain the harmony. Now, if the lung chi is weak, the whole Sanjiao system can become sluggish. The whole triple warmer system can become sluggish. And if it becomes sluggish, it leads to sluggish digestion, bloating, and cold limbs. Now, these are the imbalanced symptoms. The first pattern is weak lung chi will lead to poor chi circulation. And if the circulation is poor, it will lead to fatigue and fluid retention. Why? Because weak lung chi fails to push chi through the meridians, leading to stagnation and poor circulation. Symptoms like shortness of breath, cold hands and feet, fluid retention in the form of edema, puffiness on the face can be seen, puffiness on the limbs can be seen. The person may also be easily tired, easily fatigued. The next pattern is if there is blockage in the triple warmer, the lung chi will stagnate. And if the lung chi stagnates, it will lead to chest oppression and breathlessness. Why? Because if the triple warmer is blocked, it prevents lung chi from descending smoothly, which leads to chest tightness and shallow breathing. Other symptoms like tension in the neck and shoulder, feeling stuck or unable to express emotions may also be observed. The next pattern is if there is fluid dysfunction in Sanjiao in triple warmer, it will lead to dryness or excess mucus in lungs. And if there is excess mucus or dryness in lungs, it will lead to respiratory issues and swelling. Why? Because triple warmer regulates water distribution, and if it malfunctions, it can cause either excess dampness, which will lead to phlegm and swelling, or dryness, which will lead to dry cough and dehydration. The next pattern is weak Wei Qi. If the defensive Qi is weak, it will lead to frequent illnesses and allergies. Why? Because the lungs and triple warmer they work together to maintain immune defenses. So if the lung chi is weak or triple warmer fails to regulate the Wei chi properly, the body becomes more vulnerable to illnesses. The next pattern would be if the triple warmer is deficient, it will lead to weak lungs, which will lead to weak immunity. And if the immunity is weak, the person can catch frequent colds, and due to deficient triple warmer, the circulation will be poor. The next pattern is if the triple warmer is excess, that means if there is heat in the triple warmer, it will affect the lungs. It will lead to fever, night sweats, dryness in throat and nose. The focus should be to strengthen the lung chi to support chi circulation and fluid regulation. Unblock the triple warmer to prevent chi stagnation and improve breathing. Balance the body fluids to prevent excessive dryness or dampness. Boost the Wei Qi to reduce vulnerability to colds and allergies. Now these are some acupuncture points that which we can use. We can use lung 9 which will tonify the lung chi. It will strengthen the breathing and circulation. We can use triple warmer 5 or Sanjio 5 which will open the triple warmer and clear the stagnation and improve chi flow. We can use stomach 36 which will boost the chi and immunity. It will support both the lungs and the triple warmer. We can use Li4 which will regulate the Wei Qi and it will improve the immune function and circulation. We can use urinary bladder 13 which is the back shoe point of lungs. It will strengthen the lung chi to support triple warmer. We can use urinary bladder 22 which is the back shoe point of Sanjiao, which is the back shoe point of triple warmer. It will help regulate water metabolism and clear stagnation. We can use lung 5 which will clear the heat and phlegm from the lungs. We can use DU14, we can use governing vessel 14 which will help clear excess heat and boost immunity. Now let us see the relationship of lungs and pericardium. Lungs belong to metal element and pericardium belongs to fire element. So this is a metal and fire relationship. Now how do they interact? How do they connect? The lungs govern chi and respiration, which ensures that the oxygen reaches the blood, while the pericardium protects the heart and supports circulation. Their connection influences oxygenation, cardiovascular function, and emotional stability. So, if either of them does not function well, it can lead to cardiovascular dysfunction or emotional instability. The next pattern is the lungs regulate chi while the pericardium moves blood. So, if the lung chi is weak, the blood circulation slows down, which leads to fatigue, cold limbs, and poor vitality. The next connection is the lungs are linked to grief and sadness, while the pericardium relates to emotional openness and joy. When they are imbalanced, this can lead to emotional suppression, anxiety, or headache. The next connection is the pericardium protects the heart from external pathogens and emotional shock, working with the lungs' defensive chi to safeguard the body. So, if the lung is weak, this will result in low immunity and vulnerability to emotional stress. Now, let us understand the imbalanced symptoms. If the lung chi is weak, the blood circulation will be poor. And if the blood circulation will be poor, the hands will be cold, the limbs will be cold, and the person will face fatigue. Why? Because the lungs provide chi to move blood, and if weak, the circulation slows down, leading to poor oxygenation and cold extremities. Other symptoms like dizziness, feeling emotionally drained, withdrawn, or numbness can be seen. The next pattern is, this was the first one, the next pattern is, if the pericardium chi stagnates, it will lead to blockage in lung chi. And if the lung chi will block, it will lead to chest tightness, difficulty in breathing, and there will be emotional tension. Why? Because the pericardium protects the heart emotionally, and if it becomes stagnant, it can block the lung chi from descending properly, causing tightness and breathlessness. Also, symptoms like emotional suppression, insomnia, irritability, difficulty in expressing emotions, difficulty in breathing deeply also can be seen. The next pattern is, if there is dryness in lungs, it will lead to heat in pericardium. And if there is heat in pericardium, there will be heart palpitation and insomnia. Why? Because the lungs control fluids, and if they become too dry, it can cause excessive heat in pericardium, which will lead to irritability, palpitation in the heart, and poor sleep. Other symptoms like dry cough, dry throat, thirst, restlessness. The person may be easily agitated, and the person may have flushed face. The next pattern is, if the Vechi is weak and pericardium is deficient, it will lead to low immunity and emotional sensitivity. And if the immunity is low, the person may catch frequent colds and flu. Why? Because the lungs and pericardium, they both work together to protect the body from illness and emotional shock. So, if it is weak, the person becomes more vulnerable to infections and emotional ups and downs. We can also see hypersensitivity in a person, and also the person may get easily affected by emotions, and there will be poor resistance to external stress. The next pattern is, if the lung chi is deficient, it will lead to weak pericardium chi. This will lead to fatigue, palpitation, shortness of breath, and weak immunity. The treatment focus should be to strengthen the lung chi to support blood circulation and emotional stability, unlock the pericardium to ease the chest tightness and reduce anxiety, moisten the lungs to prevent excess heat in the pericardium, boost Wei Qi to strengthen the immunity and emotional resilience. So these are some acupuncture points that which we can use. We can apply lung 9, which will strengthen the lung chi. It will improve the oxygenation and also support circulation. We can use pericardium 6, which will open the chest, calm the mind, and regulate the heart and lung connection. We can use LU1, which will release the lung chi stagnation and relieve the chest tightness. We can use pericardium 8, it will clear the pericardium fire and reduce the excess heat. We can use REN 17, which is CV17. It will strengthen both the lung and the pericardium. It will promote chi and blood circulation. We can also use Li4, which will regulate the chi. It will help emotional expression and relaxation. We can use urinary bladder 13, which is the backshoe point of lung. It will strengthen the lung chi to support circulation. We can use urinary bladder 14. This is the backshoe point of pericardium. It will unlock the pericardium chi to ease the chest tightness. So this is the end of the video. We have covered lungs relationship with all the other organs. Thank you for watching. Take care.